It's what happens when a person starts living with their partner, starts having a long relationship. That initial spark fades. First of all, I think it's important to say that this is normal, right? That part of emotion intensity that's experienced at the beginning, the first years, that's something purely hormonal and of the moment. Afterward, what phases will that person experience? What's most normal to feel? When you've passed that mountain of excitement, of spark, and you fall into that valley? I'm Dr. Milani Rubio, a sex therapist and urologist with over 10 years of experience. And what happens is that your expectations break against reality. The key to love, to falling in love, is that I'm in my mind thinking about how it's going to be, how you're going to behave, all those expectations. And then we arrive at cohabitation, we see each other with our quirks, with our manias, and then reality overwhelms us. All this added to what I was saying, I take it for granted and don't communicate because, of course, since we love each other, it's obvious and nothing is that obvious. You have to talk about everything, and preferably before, not after, which is much more difficult. So suddenly that magic falls, and the chemistry of falling in love disappearing makes us first face our own expectations and frustrations, and then conflict appears. So there's a period of crisis. That crisis has to exist. And there are two alternatives. We build a real love where I know everything bad about you and I still decide to wake up with you every day. Or we break up. What can't be is that you continue the relationship thinking, I'll manage to change you, thinking that someday for me, thinking, no, there's that crisis and it's the ideal opportunity for we continue and form a family, a common project, whatever, or we stop. We've already enjoyed falling in love. Now comes the real story. And in that real story, if communication is worked on, which is what I talk a lot about in my book, if we distribute household tasks well, if we know how to educate our children, or if we know how to carry forward those dreams and common projects, it's going to be wonderful and our relationship can be eternal. Now, if there isn't that, eternally frustrated, how many couples? We've been together 20 years and it's still the same. And what made you think it was going to change? You invented it. It's your thing, you know? But how do you tell someone this? Well, I tell them in other words, of course. And to this Molotov cocktail, you have to add sex. Sex, of course, because before it was a very good connecting link and you didn't have to talk or anything. Because also, at the beginning with falling in love, it's much more pleasurable. But then, of course, each one with their manias, each one with their level of desire that returns to its place. There's even a hormonal regulation when a man and a woman get together and start as a couple. The man lowers his testosterone levels. He's much softer and the woman raises it, increasing her sexual desire. When the relationship evolves, they return. And this is chemistry. Not just intentional, it's chemistry. So, of course, we each return to our place. Each one from our father, our mother, and of course in sex little problems start to appear, difficulties, or maybe there had been some before and thanks to confidence they change. That can also happen, but it occurs very commonly and then variables come into play. Work problems, economic children, and sexuality is the first thing to go. Do you think you can have sex without desire? That is that it's something planned. Tuesday afternoon we're going to have sex, but without that, of course. The issue is that in your head, you have the desire from when you started, which is something that you don't have to do anything. You pull down your pants, and it works. You can have it without desire. Look, the desire for something in this life is when you don't have it. What do you desire? What you don't have. How good. Okay, what happens? Many couples in fertility treatments or who are trying to become parents plan because it has to be certain days. You'd be surprised by the number of men who don't ejaculate. Erectile dysfunction, of course, people. Frustration there is, pain in relationships. Of course, because it's programmed and it has to be. And suddenly something that was satisfactory and desired becomes a job. Right? This happens many times with that idealized live your passion and you'll never work. No way. Okay, so you have to be very careful with this. What I recommend to couples, and it's a task I always give on a first appointment, is you're going to have dates, redundancy aside, weekly, an hour for you without devices, preferably without TVS, without phones, to have quality time, like those dates from when you were boyfriend and girlfriend and it worked. We're going to have this space for us, and that's where sexuality is cultivated. But programming sex as such, that works when you're very hot, when you're in the living spark. How nice, we're going to meet on such a day and it's going to happen. But when you've been with your husband for 20 years, you say, it has to happen on Tuesday. Yeah. And then I start to anticipate, and again, let's see if it's not going to go well. And again, if I don't have an orgasm and if it doesn't go well, we're going to argue. And this is a snowball effect, terrifying. So in a certain way, you can force that desire, right? Do something so that we generate that chemistry internally. Instead of forcing, stimulate. Okay, let's talk about stimulating. I call it stimulating. How do we stimulate that desire? Okay, if you want, I can talk about how the girls program works as an example. Yes. Look, the first thing we work on is self-knowledge about one's own body. Because many times we think that desire has to be associated with pleasure in my genitals and the rest of your body. What happens? Aren't you a piece of skin attached to your genitals or what? Knowing all that, knowing what you really like, knowing how to communicate it. The other day I did a survey with the girls in my desire and pleasure program. I told them, of all the tools, which has been the most impactful for you? They told me, the communication tools, because I've been able to express myself well so the other person understood me, and things have really started to change. But one had been married for 30 years, and the husband said, wow, what was that? It's like it's so hard for us women to ask and more in this area. Like, for men too, but it's so hard for us because all our lives they've told us, you remember, shut up, you don't talk about that. They give you labels. We don't know how to communicate. We don't even know we have the right to communicate. We do the same as always. Then we teach the girls to masturbate if they want, of course. So they learn to touch themselves, to use different toys and in different ways, how to introduce them. We work on self-esteem a lot, many times social skills, even with friends, with family. Then when you learn to set limits, to express yourself or to love yourself outside, you do it inside and they say, wow, how many things we've worked on. And we've barely touched the topic of sex. But sex works. Why? Because it's a consequence. You see, before continuing, let's talk about female masturbation. How can a girl watching this episode improve her masturbation? There's a video on my social networks where I'm with a big shell like this, and I say, most women don't masturbate like this, they masturbate like this. The expression fingering yourself is still used. Women don't finger ourselves. We don't masturbate by inserting fingers into the vagina. That's for porn. That's for you, not for us. We masturbate by stimulating the clitoris. Many times we even do it over our clothes. We don't need such direct stimulation. Let's see. So this is very important that we stop doing it like that. Whoever likes it, wonderful, but the vast majority no. Mainly because the vagina has very few nerve endings. And the clitoris, I don't know the figure by heart, but it has many more than the glands. I've known several girls who don't masturbate. 0. Of course, that's something to consider. Or is it okay that they just don't feel it? Look, here, everyone does what they want. But it's clear that if you masturbate and you know what you like, it's easier for you to then do what you like as a couple. Many times, sexual satisfaction with someone comes from having personal satisfaction. So, of course, teaching girls is for something, and many times they don't masturbate because they've told you, girl, you don't touch yourself, that's a sin, that's dirty. This still exists even today. Yeah, let's continue with that work. First self-knowledge, then what do you teach the couple or the girl to be able to ignite that flame? Of course, I've told you of a ton of things. Self-esteem, understanding myself well, loving myself, also physical self-esteem, which, well, that melon has already been opened before. Man, that melon, do you think it's possible to solve? That is, how do I accept my body if I first see what's on social media? Then there are people, for example, I don't know if I'm overweight. You have to accept it too. You have to improve the situation. But how do I improve it by loving myself? It's a bit difficult. That is, If you want to change your body, it's because you're not happy with it. Yes. And you have the right not to be happy, but you also have the right to live in the real world. So I often tell them, okay, let's go to the beach. Let's go to a changing room, a gym. What women are there? Like, because I've seen very few bodies like those I see on networks or in porn in my life. It's not real. You're a real woman. So let's work on that critical capacity. Then we all have points we like more about ourselves. There's a very simple exercise for whoever's listening to us, which is when you look at yourself in the mirror, instead of looking at your defects, which is what you always do. We're always like, oh, the legs, the hips, the belly, right? What do you like most about yourself? Instead of focusing on what you don't like, focus on emphasizing what you like most. Well, if you like your eyes, make up your eyes. Your hair, well, take care of your hair. But many times we neglect what we like, our potential, for covering what we don't like, and that only generates more insecurity. And going back to the topic of long relationships and having those sexual relationships without desire, there are people who become roommates and stop being a couple. We've said the thing about dates. What other things are you seeing in consultation regarding this topic? Okay, there's something very important that I explain there in the book, and that I explain a lot on my social networks, which is that there isn't a single type of desire. We usually understand that desire is something that comes to us and that we go for it and that it's spontaneous, natural, and that's very good. But most women in the world don't function like that in a long-term relationship. When we're in love like that, yes, but then our desire evolves. Be careful, there are many men who also function this way, but the vast majority are women. So to that spontaneous desire that's born just because, to that fire, let's call it type 1. Most women are type 2. I'll explain it to you very simply. In type 1, desire appears. It could be that I woke up horny just because I get excited, and if I'm lucky, I get satisfied. In most women, after falling in love and a long relationship, these elements are inverted. That is, until my body doesn't react, desire doesn't appear. Countless women tell me, I don't feel like it. I don't remember all day. I don't feel like it. I wouldn't do it on my own. Now, if my partner comes, we're comfortable, the kids are already in bed, I'm not stressed, and they come, I let myself go, wow, I have a great time because it wakes up. Usually in couples, there's one who's in type 1 desire and another in type 2. Usually it's the man in type 1 and the woman in type 2. Sometimes it happens the other way around. What happens? That since we only understand that if I really want to, I get to it, we don't let ourselves go. Second part, since you guys are quite clumsy with the approaches and you don't know how to seduce us, well, of course, we don't let ourselves go either. Third part, since we don't tell you how we want you to seduce us, we don't let ourselves go either. It's a wheel. So imagine everything that can be worked on in therapy. You see, it's totally beautiful work because suddenly people understand many things, the dynamics change, and not only sexuality improves, communication improves, everything improves, but that communication is what I want to get to. You become a roommate and there's a conversation you're not having. How can they have that uncomfortable conversation? How can they bring up the topic, talk about it, without feeling offended, without feeling that the relationship is going badly either? Because it's not that the relationship is going badly because of that. Because, of course, people will say, okay, listen, on the podcast that you have to have a conversation about the sexual topic and communicate. The issue is that then they leave the podcast, look around and do, no way am I starting that conversation. Of course. So, of course, what can we do to push them to do it? How can they create a safer environment? What do you recommend? Training in assertiveness skills. Assertiveness is a way of communicating effectively to say what you want to say, generate or increase the probabilities of generating the impact or consequence you want to achieve without hurting the other or minimizing the impact on the other. And this is trained. They're communication skills. Surely you've been with people who tell you off and you say, but how elegant, wow, right? How nice, how well communicated. And this is trained. I actually have like a 7-step system, And in each session, I teach them one, I send it to them as homework on those days, another, right? All my boys and all my girls train it because it's super important, and then you take that to sex. We can see some tool if you want. This is long, but if you want some kind, that went with my question, that went to how can we be more assertive? How can we enter that terrain that seems like a war without being a war, without being an alliance? Well, there are many tools. A very common one is the sandwich technique of positive, negative, positive. But there's one I start with, which is the I technique. When you express things from the I, they sound different. It's not the same, the computer is ugly, as that computer seems ugly to me. Totally, it's the same, but it's not the same. Why? Because when I say the I minimize the blow, and I'm assuming the responsibility that it's my opinion, that it's neither better nor worse than yours. And we stop telling people what they have to do, being so directive, giving instructions, right? So just by using the I, and this especially for people who are a bit more aggressive and more direct, for those who find it hard to express themselves, using the I is like I give myself permission to. In my opinion, in my view, I feel like this. If I were in your place, and then suddenly they're phrases that you're giving yourself permission to speak. So it's a very cushioning technique for all communication styles.